I'm Matt Heidinger, working on the Adaptive Cards project. Thank you for joining our developer community call. This is the November 14th edition. These calls take place on the second Thursday of every month. So the next call will be December 12th. We're getting into the holiday season, so hopefully everyone will still be able to make it. We do a kind of behind the scenes look at the product development, give you an opportunity to interact with me and other folks on the product team to ask questions, hear about what we're working on. We do technical deep dives. We kind of just give you a really kind of raw look at how we do things. And hopefully there are good takeaways that you take out of it. So today, in particular, the Microsoft Ignite conference just happened. So we'll do a short recap of that. And there's a link to it right here. So if you go to aka.ms/ACIgnite, you will be able to watch the session. Hopefully some of you have gotten to see it. If not, that's great. We'll do a small recap. I'm not really going to redo the entire session. I don't know if that'd be entirely valuable, but I'll walk through it at a kind of a somewhat brisk pace, and also talk about some of my takeaways. I got to meet with a handful of people, and Tim, I see you're on the call, so feel free to chime in on this too. And then, like I mentioned early on, if people would be curious, I can take a few minutes at the end and give kind of a behind the scenes look, if you've been curious at what it's like to build a session for conferences like Ignite, or build, if you're interested in speaking or have been doing speaking and just thought maybe it'd be neat to learn a little bit about that. I'd be happy to give you a really raw look at how that thing comes together. So let me know if you think that'd be interesting. We'll see kind of how we're doing on time. I think we'll have plenty of time. So with that, we'll keep going. So last week, was it last week? I think it was last week. Last week was the Ignite conference. Myself and Tim Kadenbach from Germany and Teamwork was out there. And we got to talk about adaptive cards and really about powering the next generation of contextual user experiences in your apps in Microsoft 365. And our goal with that was, what the heck does that mean? What do we mean by contextual user experiences? What were some of the takeaways that we wanted people to have to, again, just figure out how to do their jobs easier? How can I get things done more quickly? How can I get things done in apps that I'm already using? If I'm using Outlook and someone sends me a survey, would it be quicker, and it is, as the data, and I'm sure all of us kind of intuitively know, if it's delivered right to my inbox and I can interact with it right there on the phone, on the PC, you tend to get things done quicker. You know, why click on a link that you don't really know what you're signing up for? Same with bots and conversations. The message we were really trying to get across is how can we all rethink about some of these business processes, some of these workflows, and really start putting this actionable content into apps that we already use. So that was the kind of storyline. I'll switch over to the slide deck. Again, I encourage you to check out the session if you haven't. Last year they were 75 minutes. This year it was 45 minutes. Dana's asking for feedback from all of us on what went well, what didn't go well. You know, 45 minutes is tricky. 45 minutes is tricky, especially I think Adaptive Cards is uniquely squeezed in that we have consumers use Adaptive Cards. IT pros use Adaptive Cards. I met a whole bunch of citizen developers and Power Platform developers who use Adaptive Cards. And we provide raw materials for traditional style developers. So it's really hard to formulate a session in 45 minutes that gets at all that. But we tried. We kept it pretty high level. It was definitely a whirlwind session. But I'll quickly run through what we talked about. I'd love if anyone happened to see it and has feedback. This is certainly going to be more of conversational community call if possible. If people want to chime in, I very much encourage that, more so than even some of our other ones. I'd love to hear from you if you liked it. But I'll quickly run through what we tried to do. In fact, I guess I'll start at this is a quick look at the behind the scenes. So let me drag this over. Maybe I'll just do some of this as we go. So Tim and I, again, Tim doesn't work at Microsoft. He works at Teamwork. So we have we had to set up a shared OneNote. And this whole thing starts from, we pitch effectively to the fine folks over on the marketing team, like Dana, who helps run this call, and other groups. And you basically come up with a title and an abstract. A lot of teams are excited to have the opportunity to present at Ignite. So it all starts with crafting this message. What do you want to do? And obviously, you know, the challenge is putting ourselves in our customers' shoes. It's less about here's all the work we did, and more about how can it help you, right? You're interested in adaptive cards in some way. It's either helping you achieve a goal more cheaply than maybe some other tool, or it's helping you get something done faster, or you're just curious in it. So it's really, how do we frame the message, not from what we did, but how it benefits you? And so that starts at crafting these abstracts. Then I like to kind of think about what are some of the announcements. Again, this is literally the raw look at our OneNote. I'm not going to go through all of it unless people are interested in it, but it usually starts from the abstract. There's a submission process, et cetera, et cetera. Then we start to think about some of the announcements we'd like to make. You know, what would people be interested in? So Teams v1.2, Teams rolling out version 1.2 of adaptive cards is coming soon. Flow action support is coming soon. The best obviously thing is, instead of coming soon, we say and released. We didn't quite get there, so you know, that was starting to work back from like what are some of the key things that we want to announce, and then work backwards from there. I'll show my to-dos, doesn't matter. The to-dos are all the things we want to do after the session, future, blah, blah, blah. But then we get into this storyline and objectives, and this really is the summary of the session as we were kind of crafting it. We broke it into 4 sections. The first one, as it started out, was meet your users where they are, and it's where I think the main scenario that adaptive cards helps with is users are constantly switching between devices, apps, and services to get their job done, especially business users, software. You know, those of us. Even at Microsoft, we interact daily with software that hasn't been touched in a very long time, like our expense approval stuff. You know, there's a mismatch of all these things that we have to do, and we're constantly switching between these things. They have different user experiences. They have different, you know, mental hurdles to shift into some of these things. So how can we help increase engagement on those things? How can we reduce time to complete certain tasks? How can we potentially write a card or some UI once and send it to multiple places? These are the things we're trying to figure out. We believe that's what you care about. And then we go into the first demo, which is really just showing Outlook actionable messages. And that's just my favorite consumer-facing demo. We build a poll. The poll immediately shows up on my iPhone in Outlook, and I can act on it right there. I can click an option, hit submit, all within the email. And it's just the best, you know, use case of adaptive cards, and really helps you increase engagement to things like that, because changing user behavior is hard. We're all set in our ways. We're using the apps we are using. You know, as a consumer, I still remember Facebook when they started experimenting with feed UI changes, and there's just these huge outcries when UX is changed, and then everyone gets used to it. But there's that path in the middle where there's friction when you're trying to ask someone to change their behavior, especially if they're just trying to get their job done. So trying to think about those ways, how can we help them get their job done without necessarily asking, you know, sweeping changes? And if you can deliver UI into apps they're already using, that's obviously very beneficial. The second piece we started to get into is, okay, you're maybe a developer, you're maybe a citizen developer, maybe you're an IT pro, but you really want to start delivering UX into your apps. Maybe you want to start sharing, sharing UI. There are various other cross-platform technologies. If you don't necessarily want to write, say you're building an app or, a traditional app, an Android, iOS, Windows app, you're building a whole end-to-end stack. You're writing in C#, you're writing in Objective-C, you're writing in Java. Then they have their own UI stacks. They have their own everything. And so cross-platform technologies became very popular with React Native, Flutter, Xamarin, so that at least now I can share a lot of this stuff. But you're still building an end-to-end app. You're still building an end-to-end experience with an app model that you have to learn. It's work, and it's fine, and that's great for a lot of cases. Certainly, you do want to build an end-to-end experience. Even just being a browser app, maybe you're using something like React or state management. But what if your needs were not that advanced, or not that end-to-end, or not that deep? What if you just had modest UI needs and want to deliver card-like UI into apps such as, and we did some demos in VS Code. I'll bring that over real quick just to show something that Tim had showed. So Tim and Teamwork work on a extension for VS Code and VS Pro that we showed. And so you're seeing that here. So when I pop this open, it slides over and it loads up remotely. This is the neat thing about adaptive cards being expressed in JSON, is that this template gets downloaded into the client here, into VS Code. So this whole thing is an adaptive card. I love this one because I'm a former consultant, so I used to have to log my time all the time, and I hated it. And it was just time consuming and monotonous. And this is kind of neat. Like, I wonder what my impression of doing that would be. I'm sure I still wouldn't love it, but at least now it'd be in a tool I'm used to. Maybe, I open this pull request, I look at the clock real quick, and I say, okay, that was 2 hours. And sure, certainly it was billable. And you hit submit. And this is neat. Like, this is literally, I'm completing a task right in here, powered by adaptive cards end to end. And Tim, as he alludes to in the talk, loves this because he didn't have to learn any, VS Code's custom UI stack. He didn't have to learn Visual Studio's, the Pro extension, which is WPF, completely different stack. One is C# and .NET. VS Code is web-based. And so it saves a lot of this time. Plus, you get the benefit of what's sometimes called service-delivered experiences, which is, I want the cloud to be the source of my UI, and I just want the client to effectively learn it. I don't want to have to update this client or this extension if maybe he wants to tweak this UI a little bit. The JSON is downloaded over the server. I guess I'll actually real quick pull up that project because we can at least somewhat talk through the code if we want to. This also gets at the same challenges I had at Ignite. I have the same ones kind of here with all of you folks. Some of you know code, and some of you might be, oops, sorry, did I hear something? So I will pull that over really quickly just to summarize the point. So this is the code. If you're not a programmer, that's okay. I think it's relatively easy to follow. But just to show a little bit of the behind the scenes there, basically he writes standard C# code to get the task details. This is a C# object. This doesn't matter. It's just how they fetch, they have a cloud service that returns some data, and they're just putting into data. Like, this is literally just what you've been doing in .NET or software development since the dawn of time. You're making a request and you're putting into an object. And then it gets into the adaptive card part. And so if I control click on this link, this is the template that powers that UI. And hopefully most of you are aware of adaptive card templating. If you've been on these calls, I've been really trying to promote it. In fact, because again, not promoting it for my own sake, but it's just such a time saver if you're interested in adaptive cards and you want to go from, okay, that sample seems cool, but how do I fill it with real data? So I'll quickly transition to something that I don't think was done at the last community call, because I think I just rolled it out for Ignite. All these things blend together. If you go to adaptivecards.io though, and click on samples, again, this all works today if you just go to adaptivecards.io, and you click on this toggle that says use adaptive card templating, now you'll start to get a improved version of all of our samples. We went through most of them, and like the stock updates, you know, a good example. This data, this is purely data. What's the symbol? What's the company name? What's the sector? It has no presentation information. There's no way to know how should I lay out this data? How should I present it to a user? And that's where the adaptive card template comes in. So here's the data. Down here is the template. And you can see it's an adaptive card like you would have seen before. But if I turn off templating, just to show what it used to look like, you can see the data right here in the text block. So Microsoft Corp, September. It's very coupled together. So if you want to reuse this card with other data, maybe you don't want to show Microsoft, maybe you want to show some other company, you have to build this card up from scratch every time using various technologies. What templating helps do is saves all that time, where now instead of having Microsoft Corp right in there, I just bind using these curly brace tokens to company name from the data. And as long as this matches this, now you can start creating these reusable templates, and then all you have to do is pass in the data. And so that is what we showed Tim. This is why I think the session is being, you know, I'm always nervous. I was nervous pulling up the scores afterwards. You know, evals are super important to help us know what worked, what didn't. Certainly got feedback that it was a whirlwind session. I totally understand that. I knew I was taking a risk on cramming so much into a 45-minute session. But what I loved in particular about this year's Ignite session was having Tim out there to give a real world perspective on a lot of this. You know, rather than me just saying, hey, I think this would be neat, it was how they were actually able to save time and actually use a lot of this stuff. So the same concepts were taken, where here's the template. Again, this is just an adaptive card. The cool thing is it's just hosted at this URL. So if they ever want to, again, add a new column here or change the color of this text or make it not subtle, they just have to update it at this URL. And then VS Code will automatically get that change. It's just such a neat way if you've done client-side development, or you know it's burdensome to have people update their clients, to have people update to the same version. So this is just a really neat, powerful way to describe some of this UI hosted in the cloud, so that you have one place and every client that you might use just happens to use that same template. So this would work, by the way, if you're rendering your own card, but you could also use this templating stuff if you're just an actionable message developer, or if you're building a bot. You can apply the template yourself. You don't necessarily have to go all the way to rendering it yourself into a card or into, you know, an app like Visual Studio. So the point in all that is templating is more approachable now. You can click try it yourself at adaptivecards.io, and it will load up the template along with the sample data. If you click on preview mode, you will see that it applies the template. So instead of showing the curly brace tokens there, you can apply it. David on the call is working on some fantastic improvements to this binding experience. I show them briefly in the talk, but we're working on making this even more user-friendly to create these templates, bind it to some data, preview it at design time, and then, you know, use it in your actual applications. And when you want to use it, that's when you start reading the documentation more about templating. And, you know, this will hopefully help you get started with templating. It is a preview feature, but it's certainly very stable. We're using it successfully in applications. So you don't necessarily need to shy away from it from that perspective. So we talked about delivering UX. Then the last real thing was empowering anyone to build this actionable UI. And the message here is one that I've talked about a handful of times. Actually, I'll pull up my other profile really quickly. Go to admin.appbot.io, because I know some of you are, what's known as citizen developers or low code or no code or Power Platform developers who want to be part of this, want to embark on this mission to help their businesses along without necessarily going to a traditional dev team for things. A customer, I won't say their name for whatever reason, it's not like it was bad information, but they said, I've tried to make requests for simple things to a development team, and they want to do quote unquote, real work. We're doing the real development. And so you might get pushback on, look, I just want to make some changes to this UI. I just want to, do some of these things. And we know that there's people out in all businesses all around that are in that same kind of predicament. And so what I love about what I'm showing here is this is a company, AtBot, who's also been a huge partner with Adaptive Cards. They add a low code bot development platform on top of Bot Framework. So you have to be an AtBot customer to use this, but I like to demo it just because it shows how simple and powerful this really is. So I'm going to load up Teams in another tab really briefly. And what I've built here is a survey bot. So I built a survey bot. It's all powered in the back by Power Automate, formerly known as Flow. So there's no code to power this whole experience. And in this portal, I can click on Open Card Editor. This is the Adaptive Card Designer, as you've been familiar with. So as I click on this, I can remove this option, add a new one, just so we can show Community Call November, just so you see that it is actually saving. So I've added an option here. You can see at the bottom, Community Call November. Makes no sense in this context. Obviously, you wouldn't vote on that, but for this demo purposes. So I'm clicking save, and I'm going back over here to Teams, and I am going to type survey, or maybe I have to go into the chat. Hang on, that might not work. I might have to go to the chat. There he is. And we type survey. This is me talking to the bot. Survey triggers that card. And what you should see, if all goes according to plan, look at that, there's a new option in here. I've just completely added an option to this card. I can click submit. And this is just a simple demo, but this is fantastic. This is like you creating UI. Maybe you have some front-end development. Maybe you're a cloud developer even. This isn't necessarily just for quote-unquote citizen developers. Maybe you've just been doing back-end development forever and front-end development is intimidating. This is pretty neat. Like, we're starting to see more and more of these experiences where they take the designer. Again, the designer that we offer, npmjs.com/adaptive cards designer, is just a JavaScript package. We set out from the beginning to make this a tool that lets other companies build even different tools, or more tightly integrated tools. So that's just one example from AtBot. So that was really the talk. I wouldn't say, now that you've seen me talk about this, you should not watch the talk. I think there's still benefit in the talk. But that was kind of a cool, or I think it was a cool behind the scenes look at, like, okay, these are the messages, these are the takeaways we want people to have, and then we craft these demos around them. I see a ton of chat, so let me pause for this. I know David's been helping. Is there anything from the chat that people are trying to chime in on, or anything we should add to?
Well, Matt, there was one question about how that's done in code, and you still have the Visual Studio extension open, so maybe we can quickly show how we actually did that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And the talk, again, I'm trying to be somewhat brief here, but the talk will go into these details. But yeah, we basically fetch the template. We install the Adaptive Card Templating SDK. So the docs go into some of this. And there's effectively an NPM package in .NET. There's one in JavaScript as well called Adaptive Cards Templating. And it provides this API. The key is right here, the single line of code. Right here, it's called a transformer. We are renaming that. It won't be called a transformer soon. But for the gist of this, it basically says, take this card template, which is that one we fetched right here. It's a card without any actual data in it, and bind it with this task data. And this is the variable. This is just your standard C# object. And it takes the template, applies it with the data, and from there, you just get a standard adaptive card. You just get an adaptive card as it existed, as it's existed for the last couple of years. And then you can do whatever you want with it. You can send that to Outlook as an actionable message. You can use that as a bot in Teams. You can use the templating stuff even if you have no intention of rendering the card yourself. In this case, because we're building an extension, we actually take that card and we render it, because Tim and Teamwork was building a Visual Studio extension. But even that, if you want to render cards in your own apps, it's as simple as installing the appropriate library. We have renderers for every major platform, iOS, Android. The community has Flutter ones, React Native. There's a renderer for whatever platform you need. And then you just pass it the card. You say, render this card. It outputs some native UI. You can do a little bit more styling, but really that's it. I mean, this is the gist of the code to fetch data, fetch a client, fetch a template, parse that template with some real data, and then render the card. All hopefully relatively straightforward. In the future.
Sorry, no, I just want to go into one thing Alexandra is asking in chat. So. You don't have to pass a JSON string into the transform function. It can be a normal C# object or whatever you have that will work. Like in our case, we are fetching data from the API, which is a C# object, and we pass the C# object to the transformer that actually binds the data onto the card. So you don't need to serialize anything onto a string or whatever. You just need to have the card template as a string or as a JSON string pretty much. And you can bind whatever data you have onto that. You don't need to transform it to JSON or whatever before.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. If that didn't answer your question, please go ahead and ask more. So I think that was a good lap around that. I'm going to present again, because now I'm going to attempt and I'm going to fumble through, and there's a good chance that this won't make any sense or it won't make a lot of sense, but I think it's useful, and I want to at least try and practice getting this message right. So now we're getting into, real briefly, my takeaways from Ignite and how I think that's going to shape adaptive cards heading into 2020. So working at Microsoft, there's a lot of fans of Satya. I've personally loved just about everything he's been improving and changing and enhancing about this company, but in particular, the Microsoft mission. And he reiterated it using slightly different words, but the Microsoft mission is to empower all of you to do basically what I've been saying through this beginning of this talk as well, to enhance these business flows, to enhance the digital services and the digital things that your business is built upon. And his prediction, which seems pretty straightforward, is that soon every company doing anything in some capacity will be a digital company. And that might mean they have a traditional development staff, maybe they don't. They're going to have people, most likely, at every level of this stack. And the slide in the background is a screenshot that I took from his talk. If you didn't watch his keynote, it's pretty good. I really liked it. And what I tried to do was put an adaptive card lens on what he was saying. And so if again, this is really rough, so please bear with me. Please ask questions. I can't see any questions right now because I'm in presenter mode. So Tim or Dana or David, let me know if there's clarification questions. But what I tried to do was put an adaptive card lens on what he was saying. And so what I'll add here is, as he described it, is Azure is the foundation for everything. There are cloud developers working on this stack. On top of Azure, we add a level of trust. On top of that, there are developer tools. On top of that is the Power Platform. And on top of that is offerings like Dynamics 365. And on top of that is Microsoft 365, which is our consumer offerings such as Windows, Office, Outlook, Excel, etc. And there are customers at every level of this stack. And why this is important is traditionally for adaptive cards, I think we have pretty much been in this space. Everything we've been building in adaptive cards has been targeted at developers, traditional developers, to use our bare components to build things higher up in the stack. And I think we've been successful at that, and I think we will absolutely continue doing that. So what you're seeing here on the left of this dotted line is everything the Adaptive Cards team builds today. We have the Adaptive Card template service. It's a preview, but it's really trying to help answer this question of what if you could, we've got these templates. Tim at Teamwork is building templates for their own stuff, but they're also building templates over other data, GitHub data. We showed some schema.org data. There's an opportunity to build a standardized way of sharing UI across apps without necessarily having to build the UI yourself. The cheapest way to do anything is to have someone else do it. So if Tim built the GitHub template and I could just get it from that service, that's awesome. I don't now have to build this UI. And so we've got some internal customers. I should have actually quickly, okay. If there's anything private in here. It's always the risk when I share some of this stuff publicly. So we've got some internal customers who are using this offering. And what I try to show over here is who are they building things for? And this is where the metaphor falls down a little bit. I think the slide with a couple revisions will start to make a little more sense. But let me add one more level in here. And so I told a story yesterday. My team had an all hands, and that's where this slide came from. Thomas might be on this call. Hopefully he doesn't take offense to me calling this out. I think it was Thomas. Someone asked on the call a couple months ago, they were doing a lot of SharePoint development and asked, can I render an adaptive card in a SharePoint web part? And my answer was no, not today. But here's the documentation, and it would be pretty straightforward to build that yourself and then publish it. And I think the answer back was, well, I'm a citizen developer. I don't really have the knowledge or experience to do something like that. And I kind of just left it at that. And the reason I share that story is, and I'll just put in this higher level stack too, is I think there's an opportunity for us on the Adaptive Cards team to try and think a little more holistically about who our customers are, not just our direct customers. I'm trying to find a way to word this, but we have a disconnected or there's a hop between, we have our first level customers who are using our bare products as they are. They're building products. So Power Automate is an example. Power Automate uses our Designer SDK, just like, or will be, as we haven't announced it or released it, but we're working on it, and I think that's known. If not, now you know. We are working on integrating the Designer into Power Automate to make it so that, just like that AtBot experience, it just makes it very straightforward. Design some UI. Design some UI in the tool you're already using. You're building this flow. You've gathered up some data using Power Automate. Right now, you have to leave that tool. Like, what if we can make that more straightforward for citizen developers to use that tool? So the trick here is Power Automate is our customer. We work with them very closely. David on this call has been working very tirelessly to make the Designer work great within Power Automate. I'm really excited to share that hopefully when we're able to. But after that becomes people like Thomas and Luis and these Power Platform MVPs who are consumers of adaptive cards and have questions and feedback, and they're our customers too, right? They're Adaptive Cards customers. They're just slightly disconnected. And the challenge we have is that our Power Platform customers are very different than, say, Outlook actionable messages questions. I just quickly saw the chat, and there was a lot of chat about actionable messages and things. So just trying to reframe the team to think a little bit more holistically, and what can we start to do? So all that spiel, hopefully that was somewhat useful. All that spiel gets into, I'm going to propose, or at least consider, adding some more stuff that our team is invested in from a development standpoint, to try and think a little bit more than the bare building blocks. So this doesn't exist today, but I threw it in here. So the potential of a SharePoint web part. What if our team did build and maintain a SharePoint web part that abstracted adaptive cards, made it easy for IT pros to drop this in? What if we did a little bit more service integration with AdaptiveCards.io? Right now, you can go to the Actionable Messages Designer and log in. It's a fantastic tool for building an actionable message for Outlook and actually sending it. And it's really neat. You can click send, and it sends an actionable message into Outlook. It's a really great user-friendly end-to-end experience, specifically for actionable messages. The way that you will do such a thing in bots is slightly different. The way you'll do some of these. So this is a consideration. Again, none of this is what we're going to do, but it's trying to think a little bit more. What if AdaptiveCards.io, the designer, could have a more intimate understanding of some of these services? You know, what if it could, when you're at the Outlook host app dropdown, what if it could do that, some of the actual messages integration? Or when you click on Teams, what if you could click send and it could send to Teams? I don't know how technically feasible any of that is, but at least thinking about it more from our customers. They care about that end-to-end experience. We've been focused so much on building the bare bone tools that we have an opportunity in 2020 to really start thinking a little bit more holistically. This other one here is a Flow Connector. So I'm going to start prototyping, hopefully over the holidays. If there's some slow time when I'm back in Michigan with the family and they're all at work, I'm going to maybe prototype building a custom Flow connector or a Power Automate connector. I don't know if they've been renamed, to connect with the service, the service. So instead of you having to make HTTP calls yourself, which again you can do, what if we can make it easier and just have an adaptive card connector that you drop into Power Automate? It's super simple. Say, here's the template URL, here's my data. And it just does all that for you. It abstracts away the REST call and just makes it a little easier. Spanning all that, though, is this thing on the side, which is a shared schema, the shared adaptive card schema, and the shared templating language. So that, I think, is the neat part about all this, is that for wherever you fall on this stack, cloud developer, traditional developer, citizen developer, IT pro, you have a shared schema, you have a shared templating language, and I think that's really the power in reducing cost and making it so that you can work with all these different products in a familiar way. So I don't know if that made any sense. Again, I can't see any of the chat. Hopefully it made a little bit of sense. The point for me is, though, we're trying to rethink a little bit more on what we focus on. So, God, I love this picture. I asked Tim for a high-res one. I mean, this looks like we hired a photographer to take this photo. I just think this is the coolest thing. We look like it looks like it has like a fog machine in the background. We just look like the coolest DJs, the coolest Microsoft DJs that ever did be. So this was Tim and I on stage. This is my summary of the takeaway. I think citizen developers are a major growth opportunity for adaptive cards. It's just empowering people to build UI. That is, it's a pretty interesting opportunity. So over 2020, I know I'm personally going to invest more time in understanding their needs and what they're trying to achieve. Another takeaway is just thinking end-to-end is critical for customer satisfaction. I put they because, again, this was at my all hands. But you, those of you on this call, you don't care about our org structure. When someone tells me that I tried to send this adaptive card to Teams and it was 25 kilobytes, so it got rejected, well, that is a Teams limitation, but that person doesn't care. Like, they don't care that you only work on the base stack. So getting all of us, at least those of us in Microsoft, to think end-to-end, I think is very critical for making you, our customers, satisfied. And I said this a bunch of times, it is tricky. It was really hard to formulate a story, a 45-minute session that resonates with just vastly different audiences, from traditional devs to citizen devs to IT pros and consumers. That was just a takeaway that I had. This was cool. I don't know, those of you on Twitter, I don't know if you've seen this. So Luis one of our MVPs, and she walked up after the session and handed me this, and I just thought this was the coolest thing. This is effectively a sketchnote recreation that she makes live during the session. For me, it's like an interactive comic strip that replays the session. So it's really neat if you haven't seen the video, if you follow along with this. Some of these are just really cool recreations of the slides. I mean, it's just neat that I don't even know how her brain works fast enough to do this, like as a session is happening live. So I just thought this was really cool. She tweeted this out. And it was like the coolest recap I've ever seen of a session. With that, I think that was all I had. I do always want to call out, go to ak.ms/AC features to tell us what to focus on. It takes a minute. All it requires is an email address. We are seeing a lot of votes. Thank you to all of you who are telling us what to build today. Yeah, I guess I'll just say, were there any questions that I missed? Was that interesting? I'll leave that open. I did a lot of the behind the scenes. The really only other thing I would add, as by the way, we'll take this in. This is officially Q&A time. I'll just, if there are questions, please add them. Tim, or have there been any that we'd like to get at now? Really, the only other thing you didn't see behind the scenes is this is what we print out, and I forgot to, so we just had it on Tim's machine. It's always good to have a nice bulleted list of your demo scripts. That's the last piece. If you're doing stuff like this, call out the demos, have call outs that are just reminders, don't get too detailed. I typically like to print this section out, but I completely forgot, but it was nice to have it next to Tim's screen. It's very helpful because, you get on stage and you might have practiced a bunch of times, but you're just, you might get a little jittery. So it's good to have these things in the background. Always have a pre-demo setup as well. Know to turn off audio. For example, I do a demo in Teams. So it's important, which is connected to Microsoft stuff. So there's potentially confidential information in there. So make sure to, resize that to hide the left bar. Test things. Load tabs, Zoom. It's very important to Zoom stuff beforehand. Always good to have this stuff. I don't know if I can share this or maybe blog this if people would find this interesting. This has been a work in progress as I've done sessions over the last, 10 years or so. But this is my general formula. Tim, thanks so much for helping. I think that was fantastic to have you up there.
There's a question. And there is a question about when can we expect the templating functions to be working? Saw that they were marked not working yet in the doc.
Yeah, that's a great question. So templating functions I'm focusing on right now. I don't have anything to share with that yet. If you're using the JavaScript library, there is a, let me see if I can pull up, I have the code open. Give me 1 second. Everything in Adaptive Cards is open source, including our website. So if you go to source.js script, lovely name, script.js. Okay. So put this over here. If you are using the JavaScript library called Adaptive Cards Templating, there is an API, and this is documented on the package itself, where you can register custom functions. You say, I want my function to be this, and then just write a callback and do the thing. So there is an API that exists where you can write any custom functions you want as we're working on standardizing the existing functions. So if you're using JavaScript, you can use this today. Let me pull up where that is. If you go into templating SDKs, that's where you can learn everything about, right, for the preview, we only have JavaScript and .NET available. So if you click on this one, Adaptive Cards Templating, that will take you to the JavaScript library, which does have documentation. No, maybe it doesn't. Yes, yeah, it does. It does have the register function. So here's how you could at least register custom functions, and this is a perfect escape hatch as we're working on standardizing the existing functions. In .NET, that's not available yet. We're working on it right now. I'm hopeful that in the next couple of weeks, we'll release an update to .NET that has the same functionality to register custom functions. And hopefully that'll be what you need to do what you need today. That's assuming that you're binding the card in your own backend and then sending an adaptive card. I would love to hear from you, though, what types of functions you need, because we are trying to figure out what the heck do we need to have in our base set of functions. We know we need things like formatting. You can see things that we have in there right now for like string formatting and things. That'd be great for us to know. I've said this a bunch of times, but the main blocker for us releasing templating is an increased confidence that it is able to do what you need. We're able to template over all types of data, as in you are successful. That's why if you look at all these samples, we tried to find data from the web. If I click on this calendar reminder, the data we used is a Google Calendar event. We scoured the internet to find real data formatted in very weird ways, because that's the reality of data. And then could we write a template over that data without necessarily modifying the template? So we're doing it on our own to try and like, here's, schema.org restaurant data. That only gets us so far. Obviously in a business, we don't have access to your data. So the goal that we'd love to have is, can you write a template over your data? Let's say we want to get 80% of the way there. If that didn't answer your question, please do let me know. So Bill asked, how do you use your demo script / reminders? Do you print a copy or just use it apart? For the demos, I do try to print a copy, but forgot. So I usually have a giant OneNote. Again, goes from title and abstract down to announcements. Announcements are really great for just grounding, like what do we want to build the storyline out of? What do we want to wrap it around the announcements? To-do list, storyline and objectives, and then the demos. And then the only part I print is the pre-demo setup all the way through the demos. And I like to print it in a large font because everything gets smaller. You get a little myopic when you're standing up there. There's all those people, smiling or potentially grimacing back at you. So it is good to print it out in a large font. Any other questions or?
Just a couple comments about they appreciate the work and what you showed today. It's very interesting. We like the thinking behind the session.
Cool.
So that's helped. Very useful. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, then let me just kind of wrap it up again. Here's the links. So aka.ms/ACignite gets you to the session. AC features, tell us what you want. Oh, I want to call out, this is a long link. Let me put it in the chat. Tim wrote wow, that is pasting awfully.
And we'll put all three of these links as resources in the blog too. We can add those to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I pasted a very large version of that. So really check it out. But Tim wrote a great post on templating and how it can hopefully help you. So check that out. Next call will be December 12th at 9 a.m. Don't know what we're going to talk about. Email me if you have any topic ideas. matt.heidinger@microsoft.com. Would love to know what you folks want to see. I hear so Ryan commented from Primera. He was they worked on. We got to show this at Build last year. So Primera Blue Cross builds a bot called Scout that helps people deal with the complexities of knowing their insurance plan. And so that's cool. They said they just announced adaptive cards on our Android and iOS apps for personalized messaging using the virtual assistant. Oh, virtual assistant. Yes, that is the more appropriate term. And so awesome. Yeah, they've been a cool partner. It is nice that Primera happens to be somewhat local here in Washington. So it's been great getting to work with them and Tim. please reach out to me though, anyone at that email. 2020 is going to be a big customer focus year, I think, from all types of customers. So reach out to me if you have any thoughts. I will wrap this up rather than me rambling. Thank you for sharing that, Ryan.
Yeah. And if you'd like to demo something that you guys have launched, we're happy to talk to you about that too for an upcoming month. And then after the December call, the one thing I do want to say is this particular calendar series is ending. So once we have our December call, we'll be using the same link to download the new series of community calls for 2020, and we'll go over that again on the next call.
Cool. That's great. Yes, I love that. If you folks want to demo something or share, I would love that. That'd be really cool. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I hope to see you in a few weeks. Bye-bye.
Have a good month.
Bye.